Thank you for the wonderful honor of being with you at the 5th Tzu Chi Forum. In all my encounters, every single one that I've had with Tzu Chi, I have appreciated the clarity of your motivation, of the values that your community reflects. It is a model for the rest of us, and it is a great gift to the world. I also want to offer my thanks for the opportunity to purchase this wonderful Tzu Chi jacket, recycled, made out of 35 plastic bottles. Thank you for that. I also have my Tzu Chi socks and my hat and my scarf, but I didn't wear all of those today. I'm here as the director of a growing interfaith environmental organization called Green Faith. We work with religious and spiritual communities from across the world who feel that there is a deep link between their spirituality and their values and the care and protection of the earth. This is a new and growing global phenomenon. It reflects a growing appreciation for the blessing that the earth is and a concurrent recognition that the earth faces great danger. The Tzu Chi community has great expertise in the area of disaster response and relief. In my work, when I think about disasters, I think about climate change-induced or worsened disasters, such as severe storms, droughts, and fires related to these droughts. Over the past decade, scientists have become well equipped to state with confidence that a growing number of these disasters are due to or are worsened by climate change. This trend of climate change making these disasters more frequent, more intense, or both is well established and is accelerating. In fact, science today points to the fact that we now face a climate change emergency. An article in a respected journal recently stated it in this way: if you're younger than 60 years old, you have a good chance of witnessing the radical destabilization of life on Earth, with massive crop failures, apocalyptic fires, imploding economies, epic flooding, hundreds of millions of refugees fleeing regions made uninhabitable by extreme heat or permanent drought. If you are under 30 years of age, you are almost guaranteed to witness this. The United Nations Secretary General's Office, whose climate summit takes place next Monday, is equally clear. Global emissions, it says, are reaching record levels and show no sign of peaking. Sea levels are rising, coral reefs are dying, and we are starting to see the life-threatening impact of climate change on health through air pollution, heat waves, and threats to food security. I want to recognize the psychological challenge, the difficulty of dealing with the enormity of these kinds of pronouncements. When we hear these things, it's tempting to dismiss them as perhaps overstated. It's natural to feel overwhelmed, to feel despair, emotionally to shut down, to avoid reacting because it's just too much to deal with. I sympathize with these reactions, and I believe that they make it even more important that we who share a religious and spiritual and ethical orientation to life face them and engage them directly. These projections, these predictions are not idle speculation. They are not hysteria. They are our new reality. They are a different kind of tsunami that is coming towards us with some advanced warning. If we are true to the deepest principles of our spiritual traditions, we will face these dangers directly and we will respond. At Green Faith, we think of three pathways through which we can respond to the climate crisis. These pathways, the individual, the institutional, and the systemic, are interrelated. All of them are necessary. We no longer have the choice of picking just one or two. In the individual arena, we are thrilled to begin a partnership with the Tzu Chi Foundation on a global multi-faith initiative called Living the Change, an initiative to develop climate-friendly lifestyles. Green Faith has brought together partner groups from the Christian, Muslim, Jewish, Hindu, Buddhist, and other faith communities, empowering people to shift their consumption habits in the three areas which science says have the greatest impact on climate change. These three behaviors are our diet, our transportation, and our energy use at home. In the area of diet, clearly I am preaching to the choir. What matters most is eating less meat, particularly red meat, eliminating food waste, and shifting towards a plant-based diet. Tzu Chi is a leader in this field. We're eager to work with you to inspire many more people to adopt sustainable food habits. The area of transport is a very difficult area to shift. What matters most is using passenger cars and airplanes less and using more public transit, bicycling and walking more wherever that's possible. We're working with behavioral psychologists to research the most effective ways to help people fly less. Flying is the single most environmentally destructive behavior in many people's lives. In the area of home energy use, we must all conserve energy and begin to purchase our electricity from a 100% renewable source, or purchase carbon offsets equivalent to our own household's energy use. I want to underscore that science underpins these three priority areas of diet, transport, and home energy use. Changing consumption habits is hard work. We want the effort that people and institutions make to create the greatest change possible. For this reason, we point people towards the behaviors that make the biggest difference for our climate. Personal behavior change is also a sensitive and emotionally complex area, one that needs to be approached with psychological and spiritual wisdom, in community, and with joy. Fortunately, Tzu Chi possesses all of these characteristics in abundance. The second pathway is the institutional pathway, which involves transforming our institutions so that they too behave sustainably and become real leaders publicly in this area. The priority focus areas are largely the same: food, energy use, transport, with some institutions adding waste reduction and recycling and using less toxic materials. Our vision is that hundreds of thousands of religious institutions around the world become leaders in publicly committing to use 100% renewable energy, sharing plant-based diets with their members, their students, their communities, and promoting car sharing and bicycling and walking instead of driving. Green Faith has worked with institutions in all of these areas, and we're equipping congregations globally in growing numbers to take on these challenges. We've also worked over the past 6 years with religious institutions to align their financial investments with their ethical values. Hundreds of religious institutions have, in recent years, withdrawn investments from the fossil fuel sector, recognizing the simple truth that if it is wrong to destroy the planet, it is most certainly wrong to profit from an industry that bears great responsibility for that destruction. These same religious institutions, more and more, are also investing in companies that are working to ensure that the 840 million people globally who lack access to electricity do indeed get such access. We want all children to have light by which to study at night, all women to have access to clean cooking, all people to have access to modern medicine, for which electricity on a regular basis is a requirement. Last week in Cape Town, South Africa, we co-directed a conference entitled Financing the Future, in which Tzu Chi representatives took part, where the announcement was made that 11 trillion US dollars in assets under management had been committed to some form of fossil fuel divestment. And a leading Islamic Scholars Council with whom we've worked called on Islamic investment managers to create fossil fuel-free investment vehicles. These are important steps forward. They remind us that religious and spiritual institutions have considerable resources, and when these are aligned with our values, the results can help change the world. The third pathway is that of systemic change, change in governmental policies and economic systems. Massive shifts are needed. 11 months ago, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change made it clear that to avoid ecological breakdown with massive humanitarian consequences, action to transform the world's energy, food, transportation, and finance systems are required at a pace and level never before seen. What can religious and spiritual groups do in this regard? Please allow me to be direct. We must use our cultural, relational, and political influence to press governments to do far more than they are doing. We need governments to transition the global economy to renewable energy, to phase out fossil fuel subsidies for extraction through a just and equitable transition for affected workers, and to halt all leasing and permitting for future fossil fuel extraction, processing, and infrastructure projects immediately. We need governments to honor and enforce laws protecting the rights of indigenous communities, which have proven time and time again that they are the most effective protectors of Earth's tropical rainforests and biodiversity. We need governments to end subsidies for industrial agriculture and invest in farming that regenerates the planet. We need governments to direct investments into frontline communities that are already facing severe climate impacts, and at the same time, on a global scale, to bring an end to the hateful anti-immigrant rhetoric with a commitment, a global commitment, to help resettle those displaced by climate change. Because time is of the essence, we must also be willing to act in a peaceful, compassionate, yet disruptive manner to force attention to this most urgent issue. Today around the globe, more than 1 million people will participate in a climate strike called for by youth leaders. Green Faith is coordinating faith participation on this in over 30 countries. Such direct actions are now necessary. They are expressions of our faiths in action. Throughout history, when large numbers of people take peaceful, principled public action, the world changes. We must show our leaders that countless people around the world are calling on them to do what is right and to act now to protect a future for our children and grandchildren, and that we will vote them out of office if they fail to do so. We must press our leaders to maintain the discipline and focus required to make these difficult changes, because very powerful interests will seek to maintain the status quo. We need our leaders to serve the interests of people and planet, not the select few well-connected, wealthy industries who would continue to profit as the world burns. For the sake of life itself, religious leaders and communities must use our collective authority to push for this as diligently and as hard as we can. In closing, we know that people need community to carry out work like this, community that can support and connect them, help them be accountable to their values, and keep them encouraged when times become challenging. Tzu Chi offers such community. Green Faith is launching Green Faith Circles, where people come together to transform themselves and their spiritual institutions and society to do the same thing. Recently, a colleague whom I've long respected, when asked about what was the most important thing we could do to address climate change, paused and replied, Get to know your neighbors very well. That's the spirit behind the work that Green Faith does in organizing circles. I certainly recognize that same spirit in Tzu Chi. Having a strong community is a precondition for making every other of the changes that I've mentioned. And I think we'll all agree that this is a first step that serves as the only strong foundation for the protection and creation of a livable future. Thank you.